Today on the Coaching Life Podcast.
You got to understand, when you're coming out of high school, and I think this is what I've learned more now, too, looking back and examining, because now you're, as a high school coach, you see freshmen coming in, and every freshman that comes up, they think they're ready to play varsity. And you're like, well, what makes you think you're ready? Just that you want to? Okay, there's a big difference between wanting to and being ready, because you're talking about a 14-year-old, let's say boy, 14-year-old boy, playing 18-year-old men. That's huge.
One day, a couple of guys sat down for lunch, and a conversation began. They talked about youth sports, how to be better coaches, how to be better parents, how to be better at developing young people. Not only for the games they play, but for life. That's what the coaching life is, a conversation. And we welcome you. Now, here are the hosts, Chris Stewart and Pat Martin.
Welcome to the Coaching Life Podcast. I'm Pat Martin. I'm here with my good friend, Coach Chris Stewart. I guess I'm not here with you. We went COVID style today, guess you could say. There are some things that COVID brought the good out in. I think remote access is one of them, Coach.
Creativity, that's right. We'll say it that way, right? Learning to be creative and being able to figure out a way to podcast even when we're not in the same state.
Yeah, right. So I'm in my I'm setting up a dining room table today, and coaches, are you in your hotel?
I'm in a hotel room in Muncie, Indiana, and it's currently snowing outside. It's not actually snow, little flurries. I think it's not. We're not going to get as much snow and rain as they thought. It's going to be cold tonight, though.
Yeah, it's raining here, so it's kind of cold.
Yeah,
it's not my type of weather, but
no,
I'm a summer guy. But what
Same.
can I say?
Same. We're baseball.
Hey, but
people.
I'm happy to be here, Coach. We didn't record last week. We've been going every couple weeks for last month, but we've been I think producing good episodes, and I'm looking forward to the episode that we're gonna produce today, because we have another special guest for everyone, and it's a pleasure and a privilege for me to have a buddy of mine here with me today and with us to talk a little bit about his experiences. This individual was a prolific, I like using that word, Ohio High School Athletic Association running back for the Megs Marauders, our alma mater. And he walked on to Ohio University and played 12 games as a sophomore. One was really getting his groove, getting acclimated to Division I football, which, if people don't realize how big of a step that is. It's a huge step from high school football to Division I football. And he played 12 games his sophomore year. He was primed and ready to get a lot of playing time and have a big impact his junior year. But he suffered a serious knee injury in the first game of the season, and struggled with that for the remainder of his career. Really was able to play 6 games his senior year, I think, and actually they played a really good 6 games. He averaged over 5 yards a carry. But the stat lines are good there. But when you talk to this guy and you ask him about his playing days, there's not a lot of. He remembers things, and he can tell you stories and good things about when he played. But he's not gonna cite you stat lines. He's not gonna talk too much about his accolades, and I think part of that is because he really embraces the person that he is today, and that's a preacher at the Bradbury Church of Christ. He's a substitute school teacher at Alexander School District, does that sometimes, and he's actually the assistant varsity boys soccer coach for Alexander as well. He's coached youth and soccer. Or youth soccer and basketball youth teams over the last few years for his sons and daughter and his nephews, and all around, he's just an outstanding individual. He's a really good friend of mine, and I'm happy to call him my friend. And the guest today, if no one's figured it out, is Justin Roush. So Justin, you're actually sitting here at my dining room table with me. That's the first guest we've had in home, Coach. So, but Justin, it's good to have you here on the Coaching Life podcast. We appreciate you coming to talk to us, man.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to come to your house, Pat.
Well, we could probably get into some pretty nasty conversations here about that, but Justin and I used to spend a whole lot of time together, but now that he's got his house all up and running and everything's good with it, he never invites me out anymore, so he doesn't need any help, so he doesn't have me around.
Well, you became a liability.
Excellent. Hey, Pat, we've been doing this podcast for 3 years, I think now, almost.
Yeah, almost.
And it's incredible to me. Like, you just read off a ton of information about Justin, our guest, and here we have these resources so close to home, and we're just now getting him. Like last week with Sam, living right there close to home. Justin right here. We need to be a little more creative in our thinking process here and getting guests, because we should have had Justin on a long time ago.
We should have. And people seem to listen to the guest episodes more anyway. They get tired of hearing us.
Of course. Yeah, they want to hear these guests more than they want to hear us. So. Hey, you mentioned something, Pat, in the introduction. And Justin, I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, talk a little bit about your decision to walk on at Ohio University to play football. And, were you being recruited to any other schools at the time? And if you don't mind, maybe talk a little bit about some of the challenges you faced in your first year of Ohio University and how you approached them. I know we have a lot of parents who listen to our podcast and some young people as well, and the recruiting process is important to them. A lot of people are going through it as they listen to some of our episodes, and I've had people tell me that they've actually searched through our episodes for conversations that we've had on recruiting and making that transition, getting ready from high school to college. Talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, your experience.
I think, first of all, it was never a plan of mine to walk on. That was never the plan. The plan was to get a scholarship, and that's what I worked for. But I think too, in a time frame, we're talking 1996 to the year 2000. You didn't have YouTube, you didn't have Instagram and TikTok, you didn't have all these things. All you had was the newspaper, your local newspaper, and USA Today. That paper, and so I worked really hard because I wanted to be paid.
Yeah.
My school to be paid for.
Yeah.
But I only worked as hard as my knowledge let me. Mm. I only had access to really what my coaches provided me. And that's not saying anything negative about them. The resources are so much bigger now. So the thing is, I kept waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for this recruiting process to kind of take place, because people kept saying, "Hey, Justin, you're going to go D1. You're going to be amazing. You're going to get a scholarship, and you're going to pick where you go." And then it's literally the spring of my senior year. I'm going to graduate, and I'm thinking, when do these offers come?
Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm a naive young boy from southeastern Ohio, still waiting on a phone to ring, and no one told me it wasn't. Now here I am, like, now what? Mm-hmm. So West Liberty was somebody who wanted me. Marietta College was probably the one that tried the hardest. And, I took some visits to West Liberty, Marietta, Fairmont. Those are the three that I visited. And West Liberty wanted me. And I sat down with the coach and we talked. But at the end of that discussion, it's like, all right, coach, like, I'm from Meigs County. How much money are you going to give me to come play? Because I need assistance, because mom and dad aren't, they're not making a ton of money.
A big family too.
Yeah. So I had 3 other brothers and an older brother who just broke his leg, a couple years before. So it's like, and I just remember that coach looking at me and be like, "Well, Justin, we want you to come here, and we just don't give money out. We want you to come here and prove it." And I'm like, "Well, wait a second. What was the last 4 years about?"
Yeah.
Like what did I, was that for nothing? Like who was I proving something to then? Myself? And so Marietta coach, like I said, he said all the right things, but the way that he talked to me was, he says, listen, Justin, you can come to Marietta and you can start as a freshman and you can be as good as you want to be. And we've had players who still get to try out for the NFL. And, because as a kid, that's still that's your dream, that's your hope, is you want to go pro. And I remember him calling me one day out of the blue, and he's like, Justin, meet me. Where can you meet me? I've got something to give you. I'm like, all right. I have no idea what this is, but I'm guessing it's maybe some money. So we meet in Chester at Arch and Treacher's right there in Chester. Yeah, we go in there and sit down, and we talk for a little while. And he's saying the same things, like, Justin, you're really good. You've had a great career. We want you to come here at Marietta and help our football team be successful. And he's like, I want to give you this. And it was $10,000 for scholarship, but I'm like, well, how much is the school still, and at that time I thought it was like $25,000. And I was like, listen, I can't do that. I mean, I appreciate the offer. That's the only one I've ever received, and I thank you for that. But I'm just probably, at that time, I just visited OU, and I said, I think I'm just going to go walk on at OU. And then he turned from pumping me up to, well, you don't want to do that because you're going to redshirt, and then you're not going to play your redshirt freshman year. If you're lucky, you might get on some special teams your sophomore year, and then maybe your junior year you might get a few reps. And if you're lucky and you work hard, he goes, maybe you'll play a little bit your senior year. He said, you can come to Marietta and start right away. And the thing that I've learned now, because I can look back and do some self-examination of the player that I was, is I wasn't ready to play now. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot about me that was not ready for Division I football. Mentally, I thought I was. I had the confidence. I was like, let's go ball. Like, I want to play. And I've got something to prove. But I would have never went to OU if Coach Mike Chansey and Carson Crow, who Coach Chansey was a GA there, and Carson Crow played there in the 70s when they were winning championships. But anyway, they called me and said, Justin, we want to take you to OU and sit down with the coaches. I'm like, all right. They're like, I think they're going to give you a preferred walk-on. So then it was Coach Grove. So they drove me up with those. I drove up with those two and sat down and talked to Coach Grove. And he's like, Justin, you've had a good career and da-da-da-da, the pitch. I like to call it, every coach has a pitch they give a player because they want you to come and they're going to try to tell you something that makes you feel real good, which I think players need to understand, that coaches are going to try to sell you something to make you come there. I think that's important for players to understand. It's a business. And I think players, and most importantly, parents, need to understand it's a business. But anyway, Coach Grove looked at me and said, Justin, we want you to come here as a preferred walk-on. It's what we're going to give you. And I said, is there a reason why not a scholarship? Because then I want to know why people weren't giving me one, because everyone told me my whole life I was going to get one.
Right.
And he's like, well, Justin, you're a small town kid from a small area, and to everyone you look like a hero. You work really hard. You've had success, and we're just not into giving scholarships to local kids because they come in with so much pressure and they end up quitting. And he gave examples of some Cottle players from Vinton County who were super good athletes, receivers. They came there and same thing. They played a year and then they left. But the one that was the biggest was the lineman out of Jackson, Eric. I think his last name was Davis. And Coach Grove said probably one of the greatest offensive linemen he's ever coached.
Wow.
And he was playing a lot, and he suffered a knee injury. Came back, played again, and suffered another one. And called it a career. So he had all the examples of people leaving, but I don't like people to measure me by somebody else's. Because somebody else's actions, because I had something to prove. And I think that's the thing that people are missing about me. So that's a little bit of story. Sorry, I talked a long time.
No, that's what we want.
There's a lot of good stuff in there. You said the word prove twice. And, I think for kids, junior high kids, high school kids that have aspirations of going out and playing a college sport. I think to hear you say that, and maybe they don't understand, but if you go into the OHSAA record books right now, you're going to see Justin Roush's name for season yards. You're going to see his name for career yards. You're going to see his name for most yards in a game. Not at the top of the list, but he's in the list. He's had some of the best. He had one of the best careers that a high school running back in Ohio's had, and some of the best games and some of the best seasons. And you were a flat out beast. Yeah. At Megs. I remember hearing people talk about him. I would being in Parkersburg. You went to we had the West Virginia versus Ohio game. People were like, man, we couldn't do anything with Justin Roush. But it's important, I think, for kids to understand that there is a difference, between high school and college sports, and you have to prepare for that, because you're talking about a guy here that, in everybody's eyes around this area, couldn't be stopped at the next level. But he himself is sitting here telling you, as a player, he really wasn't ready. Yeah,
I love that. That's the point that I wrote down here as well. And when you said you needed that first year, that walk-on year, to get ready, like you go in mentally, you think you're ready to play college ball, but it is such a big difference. There is such a big difference between the college game, the college experience, than the high school experience, especially, I think, in the game of football. I think football might be one of the sports where there's such a huge difference between high school and college.
Yeah. I think you got to understand, when you're coming out of high school, and I think this is what I've learned more now, too, looking back and examining, because now as a high school coach, you see freshmen coming in, and every freshman that comes up, they think they're ready to play varsity. And you're like, well, what makes you think you're ready? Just that you want to? Okay, there's a big difference between wanting to and being ready, because you're talking about a 14-year-old, let's say boy, 14-year-old boy, playing 18-year-old men.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
You can say you're ready, and I watched a freshman this year on the soccer team. He played well, but he got pushed off the ball. He got hit. You know what I mean? And he jumped back up. But that's just showing you that there's a gap there. Yeah. And I think when players recognize there's a gap, that means there's work to do. And when you think there's not a gap, then you settle. You're like, well, it's the coach's fault, or the coach doesn't like me, or it's my parents, or whatever. We start making excuses for a lack of work ethic is really what we begin to do. And again, coming out of high school for myself, like, I love the game of football. Like, I drank a cup of it every day. Like, I just wanted to eat it up. Like, I loved it and thought about it. And I just didn't have access to all the information that I needed to set me apart. Now, some of that's probably just being a naive little boy. Like, I didn't know. You know what I mean? And the first time I saw a ladder drill was going into my senior year. I went to these one-a-day senior camps. So, like, MAC schools would invite you to that to evaluate you. So I went to, like, Miami of Ohio. I went to Toledo, and we're doing these ladder drills. And I'm like, what is this? Like, first time I've seen a ladder drill going into my senior year, And so I come home, cut up a garden hose, and make my own ladder and start doing a ladder drill, because I realized there's a benefit to this.
Love it.
So coming out of high school, when I graduated, I was 225 pounds, and ran like a 4.8 40. And I thought, I'm the man. Like, I should have got a D1 scholarship. Then I walk on to OU, and strength-wise, I was as good as any freshman that came in there. Just as strong as some of the linemen they brought in. So I'm like, all right, strength-wise, I'm doing well. But you're like 225 pounds. So if you fast forward to my redshirt sophomore year, going into spring, I weighed 183.
Wow.
You know what I mean? I was as strong as I've ever been, as fast as I've ever been in my life. And you talk about the difference in the game, you always hear people talk about the speed of the game is different. But once you get yourself at the same level of strength and speed as everybody else, now we're back to talent. And the people who are talented begin to show what they could do, because they're on the same field as everybody else now. And as a freshman, like I said, I came in thinking I should have got something, and I start looking at myself in the mirror after every weight and after every shower. You're looking at yourself in the mirror and like, gosh, Justin, you're 25 pounds too heavy. Why would Ohio State give you a scholarship? Why would Marietta give you a full ride? You don't deserve one because you haven't done the work yet. You've done great in numbers, but how many people have you seen in southeastern Ohio come through and break school records and get their name in a newspaper and do all these things? Like, I've seen it before. And, you know, so it's like, I know now why they didn't give it to me. But then once they gave me the information, squatting, I never squatted a day in my life until I got to OU. I did hip sled. I never power cleaned a day in my life. I did bench press, pyramid bench press and hip sled, some curls and some shoulders, you know what I mean?
Same workout Pat Martin did.
Yeah. So you take this kid who's hungry and has something to prove, because I wanted to be great. Like when I realized there were records, when I watched Matt Williams break the Megs Marauder all-time rushing record, I was there and I was in the stands and I watched people stand up and cheer for him and clap for him. They stopped the game and he gave the football to his parents. I'm like, I want to be that guy. Like, that's me. I want that. What's his number? What's his record? That's what I'm going for. So I took that same motivation, and when I got to OU and they teach you squat, they teach you cone, they teach you how to run and all these plyos, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I ate it up.
Soak it in. Yeah.
Just took it and ran with it. And when everybody else was wasting their time playing video games, Nintendo or Sega, whatever was out then, like, I was just out there doing this thing.
And here's the point for a lot of these guys that are listening today or have kids that are listening today. The knowledge that you didn't have and the resources that you didn't have, these kids have them in high school now. And so the choice is, are you going to do it or not? Are you going to take advantage of it or not? Right? So like I'm almost hearing here, listen, folks, you don't have an excuse today. You don't have an excuse. There's so much more available to you.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube has taken away excuses, and to me, what it really exposes those who have a work ethic and those who don't.
It does.
Those who say they want it and those who really do want it. And because even now, like training my kids and trying to train some other athletes, it's like there is a wealth of information. But I think now what you kind of run into is there's so much information. Yeah. It actually bogs kids down, and they're like, well, where do I start?
Yep. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, just if you look at these, if you put Google proper running form, there's going to be some basic fundamentals that are there. Focus on the fundamentals.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Knee and rollover and what, you know, shin angles and toes up and all these things. Focus on these basic fundamentals. And if you can do the fundamentals that you've never done in your life, you're going to see a difference. And as you progress, then you start finding someone who can put that into a system for you. And that's what a strength and conditioning coach is for. You know what I mean? They put it into a format that you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I have learned that there's so much information, because even I can get bogged down. I'm like, geez, I just wanted to remember that exercise. I didn't want to look at it 10,000 different ways to do the same one.
Yeah. And I didn't want to know exactly which muscle and tendon and ligament I'm working and a bunch of names that I can't pronounce, right? That's what I get. That's why I call my son Brock, who's an exercise physiologist. He graduated with an exercise phys degree and is the strength trainer at Alderson Broadus. And I say, hey, listen, this is what I want to do, but I need a dummy's version of it. So don't give me all the science behind it, because he can do it too. They all seem to like to throw that around, but I'm with you there. Keep it simple, but do it. Yeah. Just do the work. Do the work.
Yeah, like quit making excuses and do the work. I have kids. Like I have a son who's in 8th grade, and my daughter's 10 and in 5th grade. And then, I built a 40 by 70 barn. I put a full court basketball court in there, and there's weights in there. There's balls in there. There's strength and medicine balls in there. There's anything you need to train yourself.
Pat will be over there next week with his team. We shouldn't have said that.
Right. But here's the thing. Everybody wants to be great. Everybody wants to be great. But if you read anything about people who are successful or people that are out of this world talented, what they do is they use the time that other people waste.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's the key.
Because everyone has the same amount of time.
Everybody does. You know what I mean? And if you're busy, but you want to be the leading rusher at Meigs, then and you're busy, what's keeping you busy?
Yeah.
Okay, like when I was at OU, like video games were starting to come out and people were starting to do that. So guys would go like after practice and they would go to these rooms, and they play games, all day long. But then the guys who were like there because they wanted to win football games and they wanted to go to the next level, like they would go to the training room.
Yeah.
Or they'd go watch film. Like that's the difference in people who are going to be great and people who are just going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I think from an excuse perspective, they told you weren't good enough.
Yeah.
And you basically embraced that. And what you did was you went out. They used the word prove. You used the word prove, and I think you accomplished that. I think you proved that you were worthy to be on that team and to get playing time because after your freshman year we talked about you played every game your sophomore year in some capacity. So Justin looked in the eye of multiple coaches and they told him, hey, you're not ready yet. And how many times do we see kids today, get that type of constructive criticism or, get that type of feedback and it just crushes them or allows them to, keep them away from the sport. But, you got to love it enough and you got to want enough to be able to know that that's what you're doing. You're proving yourself, and there's never a time to stop doing that. But Justin, you played those 12 games as a sophomore, and then I in talking to you in the past, I know going into your junior year, things were really looking up, and you were really excited about the season, about the team, and about your role on the team. And then in that first game of your junior year, I think you had a big game going, didn't you? Wasn't that 130 yards or something like that going?
Yeah, I remember going over 100 yards and making a wrong cut and they didn't score a touchdown. But I remember that.
But you suffered a knee injury.
Yeah.
And Coach and I we posted a podcast, an episode recently about injuries and the things that injuries bring, and as far as other players stepping up, coaches' decisions when a player gets hurt, and just all around the frustration and the heartache that injuries can bring. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience of suffering that injury that you did.
Well, I think the thing with injuries is they come when you least expect them. And a lot of people, we just did this whole last talk for 15 minutes about proving yourself. Well, imagine giving all of your time and all of your waking moments to prepare yourself for success on a field, and then in one moment that success is taken away from you, and then there you lay. In my case, that injury, my redshirt junior year, was on the 1 yard line, 1 yard away from scoring your first collegiate touchdown with under a minute left in the game. And the coach gives you the ball to reward because I just had like a 30-yard run and I didn't score because I didn't stretch the ball out because I was worried about fumbling. So I didn't stretch it. Next play, the coach rewards me. And as a matter of fact, in the huddle, the quarterback says, "Coach is rewarding you. You better get in." I'm like, "All right, let's go. Give me the rock." And two linebackers, I tried to split them, and I hit one first, and the other one just kind of was on my back, and it just twisted me up and felt the strongest little burn you've ever felt in your knee. And I laid there, and I knew something was wrong, so I was 1 yard short from something I've been striving for since I was a seventh grade kid, so injuries, they shock you when they come because you're not ready for them. It's almost like death. You think you're ready, but then there's a loss, there's a void instantly. And that's what that injury did to me. And even then, it's like they carted me off, like they're testing your knee, your stability and your ACL and your MCL, and I can just feel like something's not right. And I'm standing over on the stadium wall waiting on a cart to take me back to the training room. And literally, as I'm standing there, like I felt like my leg fell. And it hurt. And I was like, that's not normal. And so they took me back in the training room. I'm laying there, and the game just ended, and I'm just laying there. And my dad came in and was talking to me, and then here comes the doctor. Dr. Tesner comes in, does the same stuff he did on the field, test it, and he puts his hand on my chest. He goes, "Well, Justin, I'd like to tell you something, man. You had a heck of a nice game." He's like, "But I also want you to know your season's done because you got a torn ACL and MCL." And I bawled my eyes out because, again, you work for something your whole entire life. Since you knew what football was and you wanted to go, and all the hours and hours and the sweat and the tears and the pain and not spending time with friends and family, like just training to be something, and it's gone. So how did it make me feel? It hurt hard. And here's a thing too, that from a spiritual standpoint, if I want to talk spiritual in here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
A lot of times, the thing that I learned about this injury that shook me is I was a big Bible reader. Read my Bible. So we talk about these 2-a-days and all these things. Back then we had 2-a-days. You had morning practice and an afternoon practice. So I would always be in that Bible. Every break, every morning I got up, I read the Bible. As soon as I come back to my room, I read that Bible. Bedtime, I read that Bible. My roommate would be like, "Why are you reading that Bible?" I was like, "Oh, don't you know Jesus? I'm just doing this mission work and all this stuff." And I remember after my surgery, laying in my bedroom, and my that machine they put you in to keep your leg moving, CPM machine, reading my Bible, and I thought, I remember saying, "What did reading this Bible get me?" I remember saying that, and the thing that I learned is I was reading my Bible in hopes and thinking that it would keep me from an injury. But what I learned now, looking back over these things, is I was preparing myself to get through the injury.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But then again, I didn't say that when I was 23 years old. You know what I mean? Like, it took a moment to figure that out, because then I was a little angry because, again, I identified as a football player. My whole life, I was a football player. They would say, "Hey, do you know Justin Roush is a football player?" And that's what I identified as. And I wasn't that. I was at home in a room crying in a CPM machine, wondering, where's the football player? Yeah. He's gone. You know what I mean? So I handled it okay, but it left a void. But what it ended up doing was motivating me to get back. I still had something to prove. So, the injury didn't kill the hunger. The hunger just grew. Now I'm really hungry. I'm starving because I didn't finish what I came to do. I wanted to score a stinking touchdown. You know what I mean? And I'm 1 yard short, and so you go back to work. You go back to therapy. You go to work, and you got to outwork everybody else. So that's what I started to do.
Yeah, your statement about God's word preparing you for the injury, and how sometimes we look to the scripture to give us to either give us an answer that we need in a moment of need, or we look to the scripture to give us something that is going to make us feel protected from any kind of suffering out there. And the reality is that God ends up becoming more glorified in our lives through our suffering. And not only was he preparing you for that, but then everything that you had become from ingesting that scripture he was like, okay, now it's time to get to work, right? I prepared you. Now it's time to get to utilize what I've given you here for the past. I tell you, I absolutely love hearing you say that when you're 20, 21, 20, however old you were in college, that you were coming from football practice, reading the Bible, coming from class, reading the Bible, whether you had the right intention or not. Man, kids need to hear that. They need to know that, and I've been really fortunate to be around these guys on the Ohio University team now as their team chaplain and working with them. And that's the reason I'm here in Muncie, Indiana right now. Is we had a chapel service last night, and I've had a chance to chat with a couple of the guys. I just asked them, I said, "Hey, did you bring your Bible with you?" And I know the answer is yes, because it's on everybody's phone now. They got their phone with them, right? And I'm like, read it. Just jump in there and read it. Just the passage that we read tonight. Go back and chew on it a little bit more. people don't understand how valuable that really is. Whether you have your faith in Christ or not, Pat and I have talked about that before. It's helpful regardless, and we believe and we know because faith comes by hearing and hearing the Word of God specifically. And so as you internalize it, God's going to do something in you. Yeah.
Yeah. But here's, you talked about being team chaplain at OU. I remember the share times, and believe it or not, that the share time of my redshirt junior year before our first game, it actually was before the game. So
cool.
We had our team meal. We do team meal, and then we went to share time. And that day, Coach Everett Sands was the running back coach, and he graduated from the Citadel. So one of his buddies that he played with at the Citadel, who was a lieutenant and served, I believe it was in Desert Storm, he led the share time that day.
Mm.
And it was, I wish it was recorded.
Mm.
But he just started talking about his book and the things that he witnessed while in war, talking about how God's hand was there and protecting people. And he talked about, he's just given these stories about a guy who got shot in his helmet, and instead of the bullet going through it, it went in one side and went around and shot out the other side of the helmet. Guys driving over, IEDs and everything blowing up except the guy's seat he's sitting in. Just crazy stories like that. And guys were crying, coaches were crying, and I'm ready to run through the wall. It was that good. And I remember getting ready to leave that day from that share time. I went up and I shook his hand. I was like, that was amazing what you just shared. Sorry you had to see it, but thank you for sharing. And I began to walk away, and I stopped. And I went back to him. I said, do you mind saying a prayer for me before this game? He's like, absolutely. He said a prayer with me. And literally the fourth quarter, 1 minute left. Now I know why I needed that prayer, because I was preparing myself for my own war.
Yep.
A battle for myself. And I reflect on it. I think about that moment probably every day of my life.
Awesome.
God knew what was coming in my life. I went to a share time, and a guy gave the most gut-wrenching, motivational, uplifting speech I've ever heard. And I went out, and next thing you know, I'm trying to live everything he just said.
Yeah.
So, pretty neat story. Had to share it.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of people would, talking about your journey into D1 football and how that was always a dream of yours, and, working your way up to that and proving yourself and, becoming an active member, an impact member of the team, and then, getting that first game in and having that knee injury. I think people would call that tragic, but I know, we've already talked about, at least glimpsed into some of the positives that you've gleaned from it, but I was wondering if you could just talk about a little bit, what, if any, was there anything positive that came out of that injury for you?
Yeah. Well, make sure I don't forget to answer that question, because I think when I think about tragic, and injuries are tragic, but sometimes what I think is more tragic is people who have tons of skill and they waste it.
Mm. Yeah.
They come D1. I came in with guys who are D1, and I'm telling you, I don't remember them getting any stronger or any faster.
Yeah.
They wasted their potential. And here's a guy like me who was fed something for the first time, and I gobbled it up and went after it and worked every moment I had. I remember even when I was logging, helped a logger in the summertime, I wouldn't ride into the woods. I ran into the woods and I ran out. I was training all the time. Before he came and got me in his work truck at 6 a.m., I already ran 2 miles. I am not wasting any moment. So the injury is tragic because of everything I've done, and it is stripped away in a moment. You know what I mean? So when you think, well, geez, Justin, that just kills you. Well, you can look at it as the injury kills you, or you can look at people who come and do nothing. It is just as deadly. But the positive that came out of my injury, I met my wife.
Amen. There you go.
Yeah, right.
How did you meet her?
At that time, she was the PT aide. So after 2 weeks of staying at home in that CPM machine, I finally came back and began therapy. And the first day, she came in as the aide and introduced herself, and we just chit-chatted, and she watched me through some pretty tough times because, recovery from my injury wasn't the best. It's if it wasn't just the injury that was tragic. It's the rehab wasn't good either. Like I had scar tissue that built up, so I couldn't get my flexion back. And after a month of not getting it back, they're like, we have to do ballistic stretching. I'm like, what is that? And they're like, that's where we got to push your knee below parallel and bust up the scar tissue. I'm like, oh my land, you serious? So they had to do that twice, and but I think I learned a lot about myself, in the injury. So not only did I meet my wife, who after we're married 17 years next month, I'm pretty fortunate for that, so glory to God for that. Those are things you don't see. You just see season-ending injury. That's all you hear and that's all you think about. Then if you go in there, I could have ignored, the relationship that was there and just did self-pity forever, and I didn't. I tried to still find the good, and at that time, from reading my Bible, I didn't know I needed to glorify God somehow. And so I found ways to do it. But I learned a lot about myself and what you can handle. You know what I mean? So people come to me and start talking about, matter of fact, a kid I trained all summer long, tore his knee after the scrimmage, I think, in football this year. You know what I mean? So now I can take my story, my struggle, and I can share it with him. Like, hey, listen, this isn't the end of the world. You can make it the end of the world if you want. Or you can be like, all right, I've got work to do. And you can come back better than you were. And so I learned a lot about myself and what I have the ability to handle and what I can't handle, and how to plan to get out of a hole, and come out on top and be better than I was. And, so that's some of the stuff that I learned about myself through that injury, and even today, you still, every trial, every injury, every ache and pain that you have at 41 years old that you remember back probably caused when you're playing your sport that you loved, you're still learning stuff about yourself. So I think continuing to evolve as a human being and learn, Justin, can you handle things that as an adult the same way you handled it at 23 years old, and just continuing to grow as an individual. That's what that tough time helped me learn.
That's awesome. You were a young guy. You weren't praying for God to send you a good woman, were you?
No, I was the farthest thing from my mind. Farthest thing from my mind.
I was going to say, you gave you your answer there.
The book of Proverbs actually tells us that I think it says like the man who finds a wife has found a good thing. It's almost like you're just walking down the road and you look down like, oh, there's a dollar bill on the sidewalk. There we go. It's like I just found a wife. We have a hard time defining life moving forward. If as you're going through that circumstance, it's hard to see what God is doing in it. But man, looking back now, you're years beyond it. 17, 18 years beyond it. You look back now and it's like, man. My favorite philosopher, who's also a theologian, is Soren Kierkegaard, and he said we live life forward and define it backwards. Basically, my American paraphrase. But I love that, because there have been so many times in my life too where it's like, Lord, what are you doing right now? What's going on? And then a few years later, you look backwards and you're like, oh, I see what you just did there. I see how the puzzle came to be, and one of the greatest blessings you will ever receive is a wife. And you got her because of your injury. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well,
the thing is, too, and talking to her, because she did not know me. She just saw another patient come into her room who's down on his luck, And I always say that's probably what you're doing. You're just praying when guys down on their luck. But the thing is, after we dated and we got married, she would talk to me and just be like, I learned a lot about you watching you deal with your pain.
Yeah.
Wow. And I thought, wow, I never even thought about that. You know what I mean? Like, I never realized people were watching me in my recovery and how I was handling it. And she says, I learned how strong you were by the way that you were handling your pain and your adversity, because you did. Like, she watched me leave every day, like, all right, my flexion's there. Next day I come back, it's 10 degrees off. We're like, what in the world is going on? Yeah. She was in the room the day they did the ballistic stretch the second time. She was actually holding me down because I was like, this kind of hurts, so you might want to hold me down. And I screamed, I had a towel in my mouth. I spit it out and screamed because it's painful. And she was there that day, and she's like, I'll never forget it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it was interesting. And I look back, and it in a way, it's fun to look back on. In the moment, living it, it was difficult.
Yeah.
To look back now, I'm like, man, what all these stories I can tell my kids. I'm not thinking like that at 23, and now I can.
Yeah.
And I think if we're talking about athletes, and if we're going to talk to your parents that listen, and to the coaches that listen, to me, some of the people who become the greatest, they have the ability to stop what they're doing and reflect on where they're at, where they've been, and what they need to do to move forward. And if people can do that, they'll see the weaknesses that they have. As an athlete, you'll see the weaknesses in your game. You know what, I'm not strong enough, or I run a little flat-footed, so what can I do to fix that? You know what I mean? I run too uprightly. What can I do to fix that? Like, examine, self-reflect, see your problems, because you're not perfect. There is not an athlete we have that's perfect. Discover your weaknesses and fix them. You're already strong in some areas. The areas that need fixed are your weak areas. Fix those.
Yeah.
And as a human being and as an individual, like, it's the same thing. Fix the areas you're not good at.
You're speaking as a coach right now. So, you're coaching us right now. So let's sort of change gears here, because that's where you're at right now. That's what life has brought you into to being you're a teacher, you're a pastor, you're a coach, you're a dad coach. And one of the many conversations that Pat and I have had on this podcast has been about coaching your own kids and talking to people, because a lot of people do. If we didn't have dad coaches, there wouldn't be very many coaches in the world. Let's just be honest. We need them.
You're right.
Yeah. And so, what are some things that you might, some advice that you might give to people who coach their own children, and maybe what are some of the challenges that you've had in coaching youth sports as a junior high and now high school soccer coach? And then Pat mentioned a few other sports there as well that you've been involved with.
Yeah.
You made a transition from football to soccer too. That's quite a commendable thing to
did.
to talk about. Yeah.
I've always watched the game of soccer, even when I was in high school. Like, I knew nothing, but I could sit and watch it.
Yeah.
I do have some ADHD, so I think it's the constant movement of that ball that just it glued me to it. And so I've always watched it, and then now my kids don't have really the build for football, and my son has no interest at all in being on the bottom of the dog pile, he says.
He'd be a great receiver.
Yeah. I said, well, that's what he says. Like, don't get caught.
Listen, I think that's a commendable point in and of itself, that you didn't push him somewhere that he didn't want to go. That he's playing a sport that you didn't play, and you're not only supporting it, you're coaching him. That parents need to hear that as well.
Well, I think as a coach / parent looking at a player, like, I look at I'm a father to my son, but I'm also a coach to a player. Mm-hmm. And when I realize my son isn't where he needs to be, or my player isn't where he needs to be as an athlete, I have to be okay in coaching him and telling him, hey, you're not perfect. And if you don't work harder in these areas, you need to understand there's someone else who's better than you. And I will not play you over somebody else just because you're my son. So to that question, this is something I've done. I spend a lot of nights laying in my bed thinking about this, is why do I coach my child? One reason is because nobody else will, right? Nobody else will coach the team. So I have to, right? And that happens a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the other one is a lot of people will coach because they can protect their child. And I've watched a lot of guys and girls or ladies coach their children to make sure they get to play. And to me, that's detrimental, first of all, to your child, but also to the team, because that means you're letting your child play more than somebody else who's better.
Yeah. And
that's just not going to work. And kids are smart.
Yeah.
I mean, at 10 years old, 9 years old, 8 years old, they know if they're better than someone. They can sense it. They evaluate themselves. My son is 5 years old, and the things that he can say and think and the things that he's putting together is just blowing my mind.
He's a dandy.
You know what I mean? So to the parent who's coaching their child, ask the question, why are you doing it? And if it's to protect them, I want you to know you're probably hurting them more than helping them. You might be standing in their way.
Yeah, that's worst case scenario. We've talked about that a lot. One of the biggest things you take away from sports is that struggle.
Yeah.
That ability, the opportunity to prove yourself or to earn something. Yeah. If we take that away as parents, we're stealing something from them.
Absolutely.
That's that you don't want to do that as a parent or as a human being. Still something from a kid. So yeah, that's
well. There's more to learn from losing. There's more to learn from the struggles. And if you take away all those things, what are we learning? What are we learning? To water down the sport? You know what I mean? Like it just does not work. And but also to those parents who do get thrown into the fire, because every year I get the email, like when they have youth soccer, it's like, we need 3 coaches.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But here again, if you're going to be a coach, just don't come in there and wing it.
Yeah.
Try to be a good one.
Yeah.
Sure. If you're going to ask your players to commit, you commit. Yeah.
If you're going to yell something, know what you're going to yell. Matter of fact, I think that was one of your podcasts. If you like phrases that you guys use just to use, like,
oh yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If you're going to yell something, know why you're yelling it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you only know 5 points, then you drive home those 5 points. Do not go above and beyond what you do not know, because you're just going to make a kid learn something again. Focus on the fundamentals of what you do know. But it is a struggle, because the biggest thing I think you see too, when you are a parent coaching your child who is a player, parents will always think you're out to make sure that your kid gets the best treatment.
That's the default.
That's the default.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any way to avoid that, because no matter what, your kid could be a bench warmer. And they're going to be like, well, you don't talk to your kid like somebody else, like the other ones. It's like, okay. If you're looking for favoritism, you'll find it.
Yeah.
Okay, just look. You'll find whatever you're looking for.
Yeah. See, that's why I always openly berate and belittle my son on teams.
You could just cut right through it and say, folks, I'll just tell you right now, I do love my son more than I love your kids. So, I mean, hey, there's a special love there. So yeah, it's going to be impossible for that to be any different. So I'm going to do my best to be completely fair and treat everybody the same. But yeah, there's the elephant in the room is he's my son. That's my daughter. I'm coaching him. Yeah.
I do think too, something that I've, again, through self-reflection and examining, like I try to sit back and examine myself throughout the season, at the end of every season, in the preseason, like what is it you're looking for, and why are you looking for that? What are you expecting, and why are you expecting out of your players? And I think a lot of times as coaches, we expect certain things to happen and to go down, and parents always think their child is better than they are.
Yep.
Yeah.
Parents always think their child is number one. All right, I know some people and coach with some people who always make comments like their child is the solution. And I'm like, if that's what you think, then I probably am going to have a hard time changing your mind.
Yeah.
Because you're not watching the game and learning by what you're seeing. You've already got a predetermined notion. My kid's the best. My kid's the solution. If they've got a leading score, we're going to put my kid on him because he's the answer. And I've watched players be moved all over the field because a parent coach thought their kid was the solution. And you just can't do that. So you have to be able to take a step back and be like, is Jasper as good as I think he is? And if you say no, can you say why? He's slow, or he's not fast, or he doesn't pay attention in practice, or you'd rather pick grass, and all those things. Like, so if a kid can't do the things you're asking them to do, then whatever they can do, focus on that and be like, can you bring that every day?
I think that's such a real statement there, because, as parents, we're naturally and in practice, we put our kids number one in our lives.
Yeah.
They are the most important thing in our lives. So, when we're trying to serve in this role as a coach or just as a parent of a kid that's on a team, that's a challenge that we face, to be our best. We have to look at that subjectively and be able to say, okay, this is really where we're at. Even though I love my kid, I got to look beyond that to evaluate their talent. I think that's great stuff, Coach. Let me ask you something. You having a lot of fun coaching?
Yeah, sure.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's enjoyable.
I got a tough question for you. If I told you could only do one, and you had to pick, would it be never being able to play but coaching, or would it be being able to play but not coaching?
Well, the 41-year-old Justin knows how to answer that. I think when you're 20 years old, 21, 22, or even junior high and high school athletes, you're trying to impress your coach. That's your aim. I need to impress my coach. And that's usually one, if you're on a football team, 5 people. But as a coach, what I've learned now is I have an influence over 24.
Yeah.
And I can impact 24. And now at 41 years old, I want people to. I'm not really. If you do the little things right and you're technically sound and learning the game that you're playing, you're probably going to be successful some way, shape, or form. But more importantly than your winnings is I know that sports come to an end now. Like, I know it's going to end. So I need you to be successful in life. Because something that I struggle with is when football came to an end, I said I was ready. And I literally spent the next decade of my life trying to figure out who I was because I identified as a football player. I was lost. I was a lost soul for 10 years. Didn't know who I was. Good man. Yeah, I was married. And then we had a child. But I'm just like, am I a contractor? Am I a preacher? Or, who am I? What am I? Like, I didn't know. Because I just spent 14 years being a football player every day of my life.
Basically your whole life.
My whole life.
Your
life. And I literally just graduated, and they gave me a pen and said, hey, thanks for 5 years of football at OU, and, we'll send you an envelope, and maybe you'll be a donor. That's about how it went down, and that was hard. And so I'd wake up in the morning, to go to work. I'd be like, well, I used to get up and go lift weights, Then you come home, you're like, well, it's 3:30. I used to go to practice, and now I guess I'll make dinner. That was a struggle, trying to figure out. So now at 41 years old, I would much prefer be a coach because I want to set people up and prepare them for the battles and the struggles that are going to come after their sport has ended. And the impact that I can have as a coach in helping kids get through that phase, because it's coming. All 3 of us know that. Yeah. Like, there's going to be a sickness that comes on somebody in your family. Like, how are you going to handle that? Or a sudden loss. Like, those things derail people's lives other one loss in a season.
Yeah.
So I'd rather coach. I'd rather coach at this point because I can help more people.
There just isn't anything like coaching. It's the greatest. It's the greatest thing in the world. And we've said it before. Coaching is a huge profession. Not only are you coaching a sport, you're coaching your family, you're coaching your church. You take the principles of what a coach is, and you can live that way literally every day of your life. But boy, I would love to go back and play one more season knowing what I know as a coach. right? I mean, just one more time.
Yeah, one more go.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this, too, as a coach, because I've been training some athletes, from the barn and helping them. You're on the right track. Let's say that. You're on the right track as a coach and as a person when you're offering up something that and now your people are sending you videos of them grabbing the rim for the first time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Somebody messaged you their time and they just ran their fastest 100 meters of their life. And you're like, they're involving me in their success. Long after sports are done, they're going to send me a picture of their child.
Yeah.
They're going to send me a picture, of a graduation from college. Like, those things are what I save in my phone.
Yeah.
Because those, I don't like records and all those things that we get on banners, which I've talked to Pat about banners and records. Like, they were great. They're what I strive for. But now I can hardly remember them. And, I didn't make it into anybody's Hall of Fame. All those things are in a tote at my house right now. One day I'll display them, but, I live a meaningful and happy life. That's what matters. Enjoy sports for what they are. And
excellent.
Yeah,
great stuff.
Well, Pat, we got to check out this It actually has a name. It sounds like the barn.
Yeah, the barn. It's a real deal. It's just you know what though, and Pat and I have talked about this because we go to the same church. There's a lot to be said about just giving kids a place to go,
Sure,
and be kids.
Sure.
And what I've learned is, if I can open that barn door and throw a ball in there, they'll first start playing what the ball's intended for. If it's basketball, then it becomes ball tag. And all those things are important in making an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Free play, unstructured free play.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, we stand in the way of some kids becoming better athletes because we think we know their weaknesses better than what we see on the field. It's just like, let's let them go out there and play and run around and play. I mean, if you watch kids play tag, first of all, it exposes bad running form most of the time. You know what I mean? Like, you'll see right away.
Yes.
How agile they are.
Yeah, but you see the stop and the go, and like my son Jasper just broke his big toe, 8 weeks ago. And you learn like the amount of force that goes through your big toe.
Mm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
It's like, wow, what a learning thing. And I just learned that. I'm 41 years old, and my son, who's just turned 14, just had an injury, and I learned from it. And now he's testing it, which is the thing about injuries. Like, there's a test phase you come back from, and like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to get through this? And you just got to go out there and go, and off he goes.
Yeah,
he can go too.
Yeah,
good stuff.
Well, you guys do a good job on this podcast, and I appreciate the information that you get out.
I tell you what, Justin, this has been a phenomenal episode. It really has. I mean,
yeah, it has.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, Pat and I have a question that we ask every guest that comes on to our podcast, and we always conclude with this question, and that is, what is one of your favorite memories from playing youth sports yourself? Any sport.
I'll tell you what it is, but I'll also tell you what it's not.
Interesting.
It wasn't all the trophies I won.
Yeah.
Because I watched all those trophies that we won fall to the floor when the shelf broke. Because I got 4 brothers, and they just kept piling up, and one day they all fell to the floor, and we scooped them up and threw them in the trash.
Yep.
That'll be done.
So that's that's not what it was. But I tell you what it was. It was spending time with my family. My parents driving me everywhere, and my parents were special. They were good. My dad and mom never, ever, ever yelled at me for not playing well. My mom and dad never asked me, "Did you work? Did you work on your sport today?" Never. They just gave me anything I needed: balls, bats, threw them in the yard, and said, "Here you go." But those car rides and those coolers that were full of Gatorades and back then Mountain Dews and Pepsis, after games. You guys know what I'm talking about.
That's the Meigs County energy drink right there, Mountain Dew.
Yeah, it was. It was just spending time with them. And oftentimes it was my brothers, and car riding, carpools with family and friends. It was just. What I loved about football was that same group of people that carted me everywhere for youth sports, tailgated in every game that I went to. Whether I was playing in Florida or Connecticut, they drove, and I'd come out, and there they'd be. You know what I mean? So I'm very faithful to being thankful for the family that I have, because they supported me, and that same dad that's now a grandpa is tailgating at youth sporting events. And so those are my favorite memories of sports in general, is spending time with those people who supported me.
That's good stuff. Kenny and Lisa Roush could write a book, because all
Sounds
they've
like
done, I think, for the last 30 years has been travel for sports activity.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like they've done it right also.
Yes.
I mean, that's extremely commendable for them to not, because I know how tempting it is as parents to want to coach in the car, and
Oh yeah,
and yeah.
Yeah, we love to coach in cars, but what I've learned is I doubt we're really doing any good. We're just irritating our kids, and if we want them to listen to us, we probably don't want to be making them mad. Because if they just lost, last thing they want to hear for 25 minutes or an hour is why they lost. Mm-hmm. So they know.
They know.
Absolutely.
We don't give them enough credit. Like you said earlier, they're smarter than we think they are. You put those 5-year-olds on the playground out there and let them play tag, like you just said. They're going to tell you who the most athletic kid is. They may not put it in those words, but they'll say that's the best. Yeah. He's the best. They'll know.
Yeah.
They'll know.
And here's the thing, though, to that, Chris. You'll see who the best is, but you'll also see the kid who's trying the hardest.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And the kid that's most talented will need other players on his team that have a lot of heart. Yeah. That you need both of those in Southeastern Ohio to have a successful team.
Wow.
That's good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. I know who I'm going to have come out and talk to my team this spring. Coach Roush. We'll get you on the schedule.
Well,
he only comes talks to Megs and Alexander teams, bro.
Listen, I'll talk to anybody who listens. You know what I mean? And I've got a story to tell. And I've been in valleys and I've been on mountaintops, and I've learned that both of them made me who I am. And but there's a transition you got to make from the valley to the top, and then when you're at the top, you got to remember how you got there. So,
really appreciate you coming on today, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad you guys finally got me on after years.
That's right.
I've been begging him for years. He's been a bit too busy for us.
But I tell you what, next time I'm out of town on the weekend, I'm going to call you, Justin, instead of Pat, because he never comes and preaches for me. He won't fill in when I'm on vacation. He always tells me no. He always makes some excuse like he's doing children's church, or he throws you under the bus. He's like, Justin's got me working at church too much. I can't come and help you out.
There you go. So. Well, I appreciate again what you guys are doing, man. I appreciate you having me on, and
we appreciate you, buddy.
It's been good.
Yeah.
So.